When billionaire Graham Wexler's young son, who struggles with OCD, has a meltdown in a fancy building, no one knows how to help, until Michelle Washington, a kind black bartender, steps in and calms him with nothing but patience and heart. From that moment on, everything begins to change. As Michelle becomes part of their lives, people start talking, and pressure builds. Now Graham must choose between protecting his image, or standing by the woman who saved his son. This is an emotional story you don't want to miss, and before I proceed, kindly hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful emotional story content, and share this video with someone. The 33rd floor of Wexler Tech Tower was polished from top to bottom, the kind of space where everything looked expensive and smelled like lemon wood polish and hush money. Floor-to-ceiling glass gave a perfect view of the Manhattan skyline, and even the potted plants looked like they had agents. The bar was built into the marble wall, sleek and spotless. Behind it, Michelle Washington wiped a glass with smooth, practiced hands. She wore a fitted black blazer over her work blouse, her box braids pulled back neatly, gold hoops glinting beneath soft lighting. She wasn't supposed to be here tonight. The regular bartender had called out last minute, and her agency had asked if she could cover a high-end corporate mixer for one of New York's biggest tech companies. The pay was good, the dress code was sharp, and Michelle had never been one to turn down an honest hustle. She just didn't expect her night to be anything more than drinks and quiet judgment. Michelle was setting out garnishes when she heard the scream. At first, it didn't even sound human. It came from the hallway beyond the lounge, high and sharp, like something tearing. A few people near the bar stopped mid-conversation. A server dropped a tray of cocktail napkins. For one strange moment, everything went still. Then the scream came again, louder this time, filled with panic. Michelle instinctively moved toward the edge of the bar, her eyes narrowing as a woman in heels rushed past. "Get Mr. Wexler now," the woman snapped at someone. Michelle didn't know who Mr. Wexler was exactly, but she guessed he signed everyone's checks. Just past the archway leading into the corridor, a young boy, no more than 9 or 10, sat on the floor, knees pulled into his chest, rocking fast. His hands moved in strange, rapid motions, wiping his palms over his jeans, over and over. His backpack had spilled across the floor, along with a small gray stuffed dog now lying crooked near a water stain on the tile. Michelle moved without thinking, stepping from behind the bar. She approached slowly, careful not to startle him. She'd seen this kind of panic before. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a meltdown. A shutdown trying to scream its way out of a child's chest. "Hey," Michelle said softly, crouching a few feet away. "You okay, sweetheart?" The boy didn't answer. His lips were moving, but it wasn't words. 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, he chanted. His fingers tapped the floor in quick sets of 4. Michelle noticed the stuffed animal again, the edge soaked just enough to leave a ring of darkness around it. Whatever had happened, it was enough to unravel him. Behind her, the woman who had rushed past returned, her voice tight with panic. "You. Please, don't touch him. Just step away. His father is coming." Michelle held her hands up, not offended. "I'm not touching him. I've just seen this before." The woman blinked, startled, but before she could respond, another voice boomed through the space like a gavel. "Leo." The crowd parted as Graham Wexler, billionaire and CEO of Wexler Tech, charged through the hallway. Tall, clean-cut, late 40s maybe, with a face that had seen too many boardrooms and too little sleep. His suit was flawless, but his eyes were wild as he dropped to his knees beside his son. "Leo, buddy, it's okay. I'm here. Let's go home, okay?" He reached out to lift the boy, but the second he touched his shoulder, Leo screamed, a sound that stabbed through every wall. "No, no, no, it's dirty. It's wrong. It touched the floor," he shrieked, curling in tighter. Graham pulled back, shaken. "It's just water, Leo, it's okay," but the boy was lost in the storm. Michelle took a careful breath, then stepped forward just enough to be seen. "Sir," she said gently, "may I try something?" Graham turned, eyes narrowing at the stranger in black slacks and gold hoops. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Michelle Washington. I'm the bartender for tonight's event," she said calmly. I'm not trying to interfere, but I might be able to help. Graham looked at her like she was out of her mind. You're a bartender. He needs a therapist. Michelle didn't flinch. And I'm not here to replace one. I've just been where he is before. Not me, but someone I loved. Ellen, the assistant, gave Graham a nervous glance. He's not calming down, she whispered. Graham closed his eyes briefly, then gave Michelle the faintest nod. If he gets worse, I'll back off, she promised. Michelle crouched again, this time pulling a clean linen napkin from her apron. She folded it perfectly, slowly, in Leo's line of sight. Fold. Press. Align. Repeat. She didn't speak at first. Just folded. The boy's chanting faltered. His fingers paused. She laid the napkin gently on the floor in front of her and tapped it 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then stopped. Waited. Leo stared at the napkin. Then, hesitantly, tapped the floor with one hand. 4 times. Michelle smiled faintly. I see you, Leo, she whispered. You're not broken. Just overwhelmed. The hallway was silent now except for the quiet rhythm between them. Tap. Pause. Tap. The air felt like it was holding its breath. Graham watched, stunned. His son, who couldn't handle change or strangers or even loud sounds, was now slowly copying the woman kneeling a few feet away. No screaming. No flailing. Just soft, careful tapping. Leo reached out, using the napkin to pick up the stuffed dog and set it down neatly on his lap. Michelle didn't say a word. She just nodded once, gently, as if confirming a silent code between them. When Leo looked up, his eyes met hers, briefly, but it was enough. Michelle exhaled slowly and stood. Graham rose too, still trying to process what he'd seen. How did you do that? He asked, his voice lower now. I didn't do anything, Michelle replied. I just didn't try to fix him. She turned to go, but Graham stepped in front of her. Wait, he said. Don't leave. I need to know what just happened. Michelle glanced toward the bar. I'm on shift. They'll be waiting for drinks. Graham shook his head. Ellen will cover it. Just come with me. Michelle hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. But I'm not a miracle worker, Mr. Wexler. He gave a short breath of a laugh. Trust me, I know those don't exist. As Ellen called for security to clear the hallway, Graham led Michelle toward a private glass-walled office tucked at the far end of the floor. The lights dimmed automatically as they entered, and city lights blinked beyond the windows like stars trying to reach them. Graham turned to her, arms crossed. Start from the beginning. How do you know how to do that? Michelle took a seat across from him. My younger brother, Isaiah, had OCD. Bad. Couldn't ride the subway. Couldn't eat if his food touched. Would cry if his shoes weren't tied evenly. People thought he was spoiled. He wasn't. He was scared. The world felt out of control to him. Graham leaned against the desk, silent. Michelle continued. When he was 9, he had a full-blown panic attack in the middle of our church. No one knew what to do. Not even my mom. I just started tapping, counting, because that's what calmed me. He copied me. That's how we started. He taught me how to wait for him. How to meet him where he was. Graham looked away for a moment, then back. And now you serve drinks? Michelle shrugged. Rent's real. I help where I can. Weddings, parties, corporate events. Sometimes people tip. Sometimes they yell. But it pays the bills. Graham looked at the floor. No one's ever calmed Leo like that. Not in 2 years. Not even me. Michelle didn't say anything. She just let the silence stretch for a moment. You want him to be okay. I see that. But wanting and knowing how are 2 different things. Graham met her gaze. Would you come to the penthouse tomorrow? Just for an hour. Just to try. Michelle blinked. You serious? Deadly, Graham replied. I'll pay you double your rate. Michelle stood slowly. It's not about the money. It's about Leo. If he wants me there, I'll be there. Graham nodded. Fair. She walked to the door, then turned. One thing, Mr. Wexler. Yes. Next time he screams, don't try to stop it. Just be there. Quiet. Present. Sometimes that's the only thing that works. Graham nodded again, slower this time. Michelle? He asked. Yeah. Thank you. She smiled gently. Don't thank me yet. This isn't a fix. It's just a beginning. Then she disappeared into the hallway, her soft footsteps fading into the hum of the city. Michelle Washington didn't believe in accidents. Coincidences, maybe. Timing, definitely. But accidents? No. Something had brought her into that building last night. A shift she hadn't signed up for. A child she'd never met. A billionaire who looked at her like she'd cracked a code even his millions couldn't solve. Now here she was, standing in front of the Wexler Tower again, this time not wearing black slacks and a blazer, but jeans, clean sneakers, and a soft green sweater. Her braids were tied up in a bun, and a tote bag hung from her shoulder with a notebook and a small box of sensory toys she used to keep for her brother. She hadn't walked into a penthouse in her life, let alone one belonging to Graham Wexler. But when someone like Leo looks up at you like you're safe, you don't say no to helping again. You just breathe deep and hope you're enough. Inside, the elevator ride was fast and silent. She was escorted by a housekeeper named Mrs. Thompson, an older black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense vibe. You're the one from yesterday, she asked, not unkindly. That boy slept through the night for the first time in weeks. Michelle smiled, a little bashfully. I didn't do much. Sometimes not much is everything, Mrs. Thompson replied. When the elevator opened to the penthouse, Michelle's breath caught. The place looked like something out of a magazine. High ceilings, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and quiet lighting. But what struck her most was the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air held something that hadn't been said in a long time. Graham met her near the living room, dressed more casually today in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled and dark jeans. He looked like he hadn't slept much, but tried to hide it. Thank you for coming, he said, stepping aside to let her in. Leo was on the rug near the large window, stacking books in a perfect pattern. He didn't look up, but his hands paused briefly when Michelle entered. She didn't speak, just walked slowly to the opposite end of the room and sat on the floor, cross-legged, with her bag in her lap. From it, she pulled out a soft rubber tangle toy and set it gently beside her. Leo glanced at it, then back to his books. That was okay. Michelle didn't push. He's calmer today, Graham whispered from the kitchen. That's good, Michelle replied. He remembers yesterday. Graham leaned against the counter. I thought I'd hired the best people. Therapists, behavioral experts, consultants from Stanford and Yale. They all tried. They all failed. Then you walked in, just a stranger, and he stopped screaming. Michelle looked at him carefully. It's not magic. It's memory. His body remembered something safe. That's not about me. It's about him knowing someone's listening. Graham rubbed the back of his neck. You talk like someone who's done this before. Michelle nodded slowly. My brother, Isaiah. He had OCD. Started showing signs at 6. By 8, he was full-blown taps, numbers, routines. Panic if anything changed. My mom worked doubles. I learned to watch him like a hawk. To listen to what he didn't say. Graham walked over, sitting on the arm of a nearby chair. Where is he now? Michelle's face softened. He passed at 17. A seizure during a panic attack. I was the one who found him. It took me a long time to forgive myself for not being able to stop it. The room was quiet. Even Leo seemed to pause at that. Michelle didn't cry. She didn't look away. So no, I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained. I just promised myself I'd never ignore a scared kid again. Graham looked down. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Leo hasn't been the same since. He stopped speaking. Started developing these strict rituals. If his bedtime changes by even 5 minutes, he breaks down. If a dish is in the wrong spot, he freezes. Michelle's voice was gentle. OCD isn't about being picky. It's about trying to survive in a world that feels like chaos. Graham looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing something he hadn't been able to name before. "So what do I do?" he asked. "You stop trying to fix him," Michelle said quietly. "You join him. Sit in his quiet. Let him lead. You teach his body it's safe here, even when things go wrong." Behind them, Leo reached out, picked up the rubber toy Michelle had left near her bag, and ran his fingers over it slowly. Michelle didn't react. She just smiled and whispered, "That's step one." The next morning, Michelle arrived at the Wexler penthouse right on time. The sky was overcast, and a soft mist hung over the city, but the view from the high-rise windows was still breathtaking. She wore a light denim jacket over a hoodie and carried the same tote bag, only this time she had added a few more items, some textured flashcards, a wooden fidget spinner, and a mini whiteboard with dry erase markers. The doorman had already been expecting her. "Miss Washington," he said kindly, tipping his cap. "Mr. Wexler said to bring you right up." The elevator ride felt shorter today, maybe because she wasn't nervous anymore. She was focused. As the doors opened, Mrs. Thompson greeted her at the penthouse door again. "He's in the living room, just like yesterday. Hasn't said a word yet, but he hasn't had a meltdown either. That's something." Michelle smiled and stepped inside, quietly closing the door behind her. Leo was on the rug again, this time lining up coasters into a perfect grid. 8 across, 8 down. He pressed each one into place with slow, careful precision, his head tilted slightly as he double-checked the spacing. Michelle didn't say a word. She took off her jacket, set her bag down beside the couch, and sat cross-legged on the opposite end of the rug. She pulled out a soft silicone coaster of her own, bright green, and gently placed it a few inches from her knee. Then, she tapped it 4 times and waited. Leo noticed immediately. He looked up, blinked once, and went back to his grid. That was fine. Michelle didn't need him to stop. She just needed him to know she was there. After a few quiet minutes, Leo slid one of his own coasters in her direction. It wasn't a big movement. It wasn't dramatic. But it was something. She tapped it once, then twice, then smiled. From the kitchen doorway, Graham watched silently, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee. He hadn't said anything since she arrived, but the look on his face was softer than before. He stepped forward and sat down in the armchair near the rug. "That coaster," he said quietly. "He usually won't let anyone touch it." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "Well, I feel honored." Graham smiled faintly. "His therapist, Clara, she's supposed to come today for her check-in. She usually gets here around 10. Michelle nodded. "That's fine. I'll stay out of the way." Graham hesitated. "Actually, I'd like you to stay in the room. Just observe. I want to see how Leo responds to both of you together." Michelle agreed with a simple nod. She didn't say what she was thinking, that she had seen therapists before, plenty, and not all of them understood kids like Leo. Not all of them knew when to stop trying to control the scene. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, and Graham opened it to reveal a thin woman in her late 30s, dressed in beige slacks and a smart blazer. She carried a slim laptop case and wore a warm but professional smile. "Clara Holland," she said, extending her hand to Michelle. "And you must be the new nanny?" Michelle returned the handshake calmly. "Michelle Washington. Not a nanny. Just a friend of the family." Clara blinked, caught off guard, but quickly recovered. "Ah. Well, I look forward to observing your methods." Michelle didn't answer. She turned back toward the rug, where Leo was now watching both women with cautious eyes. Clara walked over and knelt next to him. "Hey there, Leo," she said brightly. "Remember me? Miss Clara." Leo didn't respond. His hands had started to shake just slightly. He reached out and adjusted one coaster by a hair's width, then did it again. Clara pulled out a flashcard. Can you point to the happy face? Michelle's chest tightened. Clara had already made the wrong move. Leo didn't like being tested. He didn't like being asked to choose. Michelle had seen it before. Kids being pushed to perform instead of being given time. Clara kept going, her voice cheerful but rushed. Come on, Leo. Just point. It's okay. Just point to happy. Leo's breathing sped up. He began rocking slightly. Michelle stepped in without asking. She slid a soft-textured card toward Leo and tapped it twice. No words. No pressure. Leo paused. He looked at her, then at the card. Then he took a breath. It wasn't a calm breath, but it wasn't a scream either. Clara frowned. I think it's important he learn to follow verbal prompts, she said quietly to Graham. We've been working on this for weeks. Michelle answered without turning. Maybe it's more important to listen to what he's showing us before we ask him for anything. Graham didn't say a word. He just watched his son lean toward Michelle, ever so slightly. When Clara left an hour later, she gave Graham a long report on goals and progress. Michelle stood nearby, listening, but not reacting. Once the door closed behind Clara, Graham turned to Michelle with a sigh. She's qualified. She's trained. But I've never seen Leo connect with her like he does with you. Michelle leaned against the wall. It's not a competition. It's just a rhythm. He needs space, not pressure. Repetition, not reward. Graham crossed his arms. I've spent so much money trying to help him. The best programs. The highest-rated experts. I thought I was doing the right thing. But nothing has worked. Michelle's voice was gentle. Helping doesn't always come from a degree, Mr. Wexler. Sometimes it comes from people who've lived it, who aren't scared to sit with someone in silence. He looked at her, really looked. You handled him like you've done this 100 times. Michelle shook her head. Not with Leo. Just someone like him. My brother, Isaiah. There was a pause. Graham looked toward the window, where the skyline stretched out in soft gray light. I'm sorry about your brother. Michelle nodded once. Thank you. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was shared. Michelle walked over to her tote bag and began packing up her things. Graham watched her, then asked quietly, Can you stay a little longer today? Michelle paused. Sure. If Leo's okay with it. Graham smiled faintly. I think he already decided that. As the day went on, Michelle stayed near the rug while Leo moved between activities. Sometimes he stacked books. Sometimes he lined up pencils. Sometimes he did nothing at all. Michelle never rushed him. She just mirrored him when needed and gave him space when not. At one point, he slid his favorite coaster back toward her. She tapped it 3 times, and he tapped it back. It was their new language. Quiet, strange, perfect. By late afternoon, Michelle sat at the kitchen table drinking tea Mrs. Thompson had brewed. The house felt different now, less stiff, less echoey. Like something was softening. Graham joined her, pulling up a chair across from her. You want a job? He asked bluntly. Michelle blinked. Excuse me. You already work here more than half the people on my payroll, he said with a smirk. I'd like to make it official. Michelle took a sip of tea, thinking. Mr. Wexler, Graham, he corrected gently. Graham, I'm not a nanny. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who sees him. Graham nodded slowly. That's exactly why I need you. Michelle hesitated. Her chest was tight with the weight of the choice. Let me think about it. I didn't come here looking for work. I just wanted to help. Graham gave a small smile. That might be exactly what this house needs. Leo appeared in the doorway, holding the green coaster in one hand, looking toward Michelle. Without a word, she rose and followed him. The next few days passed with quiet progress. Michelle returned each morning at 9, her tote bag always filled with soft tools, sensory toys, colored cards, and textured cloths. Leo never greeted her out loud, but by the third visit, he started waiting by the window when he heard the elevator chime. He didn't wave or smile, but he stood there watching, like he needed to make sure she hadn't changed her mind. That alone meant something. On Thursday, she brought a small blue hourglass filled with slow-falling sand. She set it between them during quiet playtime, letting the sand fall while Leo lined up puzzle pieces. When the sand ran out, she'd flip it. Leo didn't speak, but he began glancing at it between tasks, like he was syncing his rhythm to hers. Graham noticed. "What's the hourglass for?" he asked one morning. Michelle smiled. "It gives time a shape. Some kids find it calming to see when things begin and end." Graham had started joining them in small ways. At first, he sat on the arm of the couch, phone in hand, watching from a distance. But on the fourth day, Michelle invited him to sit on the rug beside Leo. "Just follow his lead," she had said gently. Graham looked unsure, but he set his phone down and lowered himself to the rug. Leo barely noticed, but he didn't move away either. Graham watched his son pick up one block, examine it, place it carefully beside another, and repeat. After a few minutes, Graham picked up a block of his own. He waited. Then he placed it beside Leo's row, not touching it, just close enough. Leo paused, looked at the block, looked at his father, then continued. Graham's eyes flickered. It was small, but Michelle could see it hit him hard. "That's his way of saying you're okay there," she whispered. "Sometimes that's as close as he can get. And that's enough." Later that afternoon, while Leo napped in the sunroom under his weighted blanket, Michelle stepped onto the rooftop garden. It was peaceful up there, raised planters, blooming flowers, and a wooden bench facing the skyline. She pulled her hoodie tighter against the wind and sat with her thoughts. A few minutes passed before Graham joined her. He wore a light gray sweater over dark slacks, the picture of casual wealth, but his face looked softer in this light, more tired, more real. He sat beside her on the bench without a word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the wind stir the flowers. Finally, Graham broke the silence. "Sandra used to sit out here all the time, even when she was sick." Michelle glanced at him gently. "Your wife?" Graham nodded. "She was the calm one, the dreamer. I was the planner, the builder, the one who made the schedules. She made the memories." He folded his hands together, staring ahead. After she died, Leo stopped talking. Not right away. First it was small things. He wouldn't eat food she used to make. Wouldn't let us move anything in her art room. Then one day, he just stopped speaking altogether. Michelle listened quietly, not interrupting. "I brought in therapists, grief counselors, child development experts. None of them helped. They wanted him to talk about her. He couldn't. He just shut down." Graham's voice cracked slightly at the edges. "And I did too. I buried myself in meetings and work. I convinced myself I was helping him by building a life without reminders. But the truth is, I was scared of hearing her name." Michelle let the silence settle for a moment. Then she said softly, "Grief doesn't go away when you stop saying it. It just finds a different way to live inside you. Sometimes in your hands. Sometimes in your kid." Graham looked at her with something like understanding, or maybe just exhaustion. "How do you know all this?" he asked. Michelle looked up at the sky. "Because I did the same thing. After Isaiah died, I stopped going to the places we used to go. I threw away the clothes he used to wear. I even boxed up the tapping tools we made together. For a long time, I thought if I forgot the routines, I'd forget the pain. But all I did was lose the pieces of him that made sense." Graham nodded slowly. "Leo kept one of Sandra's sweaters. It's in his room, under the bed. I tried to throw it out once. He screamed until he nearly passed out." Michelle looked at him carefully. "That sweater is probably the last thing that smells like her. Let him keep it. He's not trying to hold on to pain. He's holding on to comfort." Graham said nothing, but his expression shifted with quiet truth. That evening, Leo surprised them both. Michelle had just finished organizing his sorting cards when he walked over and handed her a coaster, his favorite one, the same dark blue circle he never let anyone touch. Michelle froze. "You want me to hold it?" she asked gently. Leo didn't speak, but he looked down, waiting. She took it carefully, tapped it once, and then set it beside her on the rug. Leo sat down beside her, closer than ever before, and picked up another coaster, mimicking the same tap. Graham, watching from across the room, felt something loosen in his chest. Michelle looked up at him and smiled. "I think this means I'm allowed in his space now." Graham stepped forward, slowly. "Mind if I sit with you too?" Michelle nodded. "He already made room for you. You just have to take it." Graham sat down gently, and for the first time since Sandra's death, the three of them sat on the same rug, connected not by words, but by presence. The change in Leo was becoming harder to miss. By the end of the second week, he had stopped flinching when Michelle entered a room. He even waited by the rug in the mornings, quietly laying out his favorite coasters before she arrived. Sometimes, he gave her a second one to hold. To anyone else, it would have looked like nothing. But to Michelle, it was clear, Leo was choosing connection. And it wasn't just her noticing. Mrs. Thompson mentioned it while folding laundry one evening. "That boy's smile showed up yesterday," she said with a soft grin. "First time in I don't know how long. Might have only lasted 5 seconds, but I saw it. And I know you had something to do with it." Michelle smiled, touched, but didn't say anything. She hadn't come for praise. She came because she knew what it was like to be a kid no one knew how to help. But outside the penthouse, things were changing too, and not in a good way. On Monday morning, Graham walked into the Wexler tech boardroom and immediately felt the shift in the air. The weekly executive meeting had just started, but the eyes around the table weren't focused on the sales charts or quarterly numbers. They were focused on him. "We need to talk," said Matthew Lennox, the chief operating officer, leaning forward with folded hands. Matthew had always been sharp, clean-cut, and professional, but there was a cold edge in his voice today. "We've heard about the woman living in your home. The bartender. It's circulating inside the company." Graham's jaw tensed. "Michelle Washington isn't living with me. She's helping with my son." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "Is she licensed? Certified? Background checked?" Another board member, Diane Marks, chimed in. "The press catches wind of this, and we've got a scandal. You know how this city works." Graham's eyes moved around the room, locking with each executive's face. "My son's mental health is not up for debate," he said, his tone even. "Michelle has done more for him in 2 weeks than all the professionals I hired in 2 years." Matthew didn't back down. "And if it comes back to us that this woman has no professional qualifications, it reflects poorly on the company. Investors notice these things. It becomes a story." Graham stood slowly, his voice calm but firm. "This company was built by me, funded by me, and it still bears my name. So let me be very clear, my son will always come first." With that, he left the boardroom, leaving a room full of whispers behind him. But the damage had already begun. The next day, Michelle noticed 2 people in suits outside the building when she arrived. One snapped a photo as the elevator doors closed. She said nothing, but her stomach tightened. It got worse. On Thursday morning, while scrolling her phone before heading to the penthouse, Michelle saw her own face on a gossip blog. "The Billionaire and the Bartender. Who is Michelle Washington?" The article called her a mysterious live-in nanny and questioned her background. It didn't stop there. It mentioned a 2016 incident, a bar fight in Harlem where Michelle had worked, involving an unruly guest and a shattered glass. She hadn't started it, but she'd been questioned. The charges were dropped within a week, but the headline made it sound far worse. Her chest tightened as she read the comments below. People questioning her intentions, her race, her job. "This woman doesn't belong in a billionaire's home," one said. "Is she the new stepmom or something?" Another joked. Michelle sat on the edge of her bed, phone shaking in her hand. She didn't cry, but she didn't move either. She felt like she was back in that bar again, being blamed for something she didn't cause. Later that day, she showed up at the penthouse like usual, but Graham could see something was off. "You saw it," he said quietly, not even asking. Michelle nodded. "I didn't expect it to blow up like that." Graham looked frustrated, but also guilty. "I should have seen this coming. I should have protected you." Michelle looked down. "It's not about protecting me. It's about Leo. And right now, I don't know if I'm helping him or making his life harder." She hesitated, then added, "Maybe I should step away before it gets worse." Graham's eyes hardened. "He trusts you. That means something. I won't let the world scare you off." But Michelle shook her head gently. "It's not fear. It's love. I care about that boy. If my being here starts to hurt him, I can't stay just because I want to." She gave him a soft look. Sometimes stepping away is also care. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. That night, Leo didn't sleep. Mrs. Thompson said he tossed and turned for hours, gripping his blue coaster so tightly the edges bent. In the morning, Graham tried to follow the routine like Michelle had taught him. He laid out the cards, tapped the coaster, made Leo's oatmeal just the way he liked. But Leo didn't move. He sat by the window all morning, staring at the door. Around noon, he started pacing, then mumbling, then crying. It wasn't the loud, sharp scream from before. It was quieter, sadder, like he was looking for someone who wasn't coming. When Graham tried to sit beside him, Leo pulled away, repeating, "No, no, no," under his breath. Then he curled into a ball on the floor, rocking with his hands pressed tight to his ears. Graham crouched beside him, helpless. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here," he said, voice cracking. But Leo wasn't listening. He was shutting down, completely. Michelle had just finished folding her laundry when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe the screen. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Miss Washington," the older woman said gently. "I don't mean to pressure you, but the boy's not doing well. He hasn't eaten, hasn't spoken. He just keeps tapping the floor and looking toward the door. You know which door." Michelle closed her eyes. Her heart squeezed. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." When she stepped off the elevator, she was still in sneakers and a hoodie, her hair tied back with a scarf. She didn't look like a hero, and she didn't feel like one. But the second Leo saw her, everything changed. He didn't run or shout. He just stood there, tears still on his cheeks, and held out the blue coaster. Michelle dropped to her knees and opened her arms. Leo walked straight into them. No words, no sounds, just presence. And that was enough. Michelle didn't expect much that morning. After everything that happened, the photos, the articles, the whispers, she had come back for Leo, not for comfort or thanks. But what she found instead was something she hadn't felt in years. The moment she stepped inside the penthouse, Leo walked up, gently took her hand, and placed the blue coaster in her palm. He didn't say a word, but he looked at her like she had brought something back he thought he had lost. Graham stood by the window, watching. "He hasn't eaten," he said softly. "Didn't sleep much either." Michelle nodded, kneeling down. "We'll go slow." She sat with Leo on the rug and didn't pull anything from her bag. She didn't talk or prompt. She just waited. After a few minutes, Leo reached into the toy basket and handed her a wooden block. Then another. Then 3 more. It was his way of saying, "We're still okay." Later that day, something even more surprising happened. Leo was lining up markers on the floor while Michelle gently sang a soft humming tune, something she used to sing to Isaiah. As she tapped the table, Leo hummed along, just barely. Then, after a full minute of silence, he whispered one word so softly she almost didn't hear it. "Blue." Michelle froze for a second, then turned slowly. Leo was pointing at one of the markers. "Blue," he said again, this time a little louder. Michelle smiled, keeping her voice steady. "Yes, that one's blue." Graham was standing in the hallway, watching with wide eyes. "Did he just?" Michelle nodded. He spoke. It's small, but it's real. And it came from him, not from pressure. Graham slowly stepped forward and crouched beside them. "Can I sit with you?" he asked. Leo didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. He kept lining up his markers, more relaxed than he had been in days. That weekend, Michelle suggested a change of scenery. "What if we take him outside?" she asked carefully. "Someplace quiet. Just fresh air and movement." Graham looked unsure. He doesn't do well with crowds. And noise makes him panic. Michelle nodded. "That's why we plan ahead. I know a spot in Central Park, near the lake. It's early spring. Fewer people. I think he'll do okay if we don't push him." Graham agreed, though he still looked nervous. The next morning, they packed a small backpack with wipes, snacks, and Leo's weighted vest. Mrs. Thompson handed Michelle a folded blanket. "In case he wants to sit on the grass," she said kindly. They arrived at the park mid-morning. The sky was clear, the air cool. Michelle led them down a quiet path near Bow Bridge. Leo held his father's hand the entire time, occasionally glancing at the trees. He didn't speak, but he didn't panic either. They found a shady spot under a tree, and Michelle laid out the blanket. Leo sat between her and Graham, his eyes scanning the sky. Michelle pulled a tiny wooden flute from her bag and played a soft tune. Leo listened. Then he gently tapped his knees in rhythm. A few minutes later, a voice floated toward them from down the path. A subway performer named Rosa, who often played for tips near Bethesda Fountain, was humming an old jazz tune with her small keyboard. She smiled when she saw Leo's curious gaze. "Mind if I sit a while?" she asked kindly. Michelle smiled. "Of course." Rosa knelt beside them and began playing slowly. Leo watched her fingers. When she offered the keyboard to him, he didn't touch it, but he leaned forward, clearly interested. Rosa tapped out a gentle rhythm and sang one soft line. Leo whispered again. Graham's hand tightened just slightly. Michelle didn't react, but her heart filled with warmth. That night, back at the penthouse, Leo was quiet but calm. After he fell asleep, Graham poured 2 mugs of tea and handed one to Michelle. They sat in the sunroom, soft lights glowing through the glass. "I don't know how to explain this," Graham said, "but you've done something here. Not just with Leo. With me too." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "With you?" He nodded. "You've changed how I see things. How I see being a father. Being present. I thought I needed to fix Leo. Now I see I just need to meet him where he is." He took a breath. "Michelle, I want to offer you something more permanent. Not just for Leo. For our home. For me. I want you here, not as an employee, but part of our life." Michelle didn't answer right away. She looked down at her tea, then back at him. "That's a big offer, Graham. And a big shift. I need time to think." Graham nodded, no pressure in his voice. "Take all the time you need. I mean it. This isn't a favor. It's an invitation." Michelle gave a small smile. "I care about you both. That's the truth. But I've built my life on staying mobile. Staying temporary. It's how I protected myself." She paused. "I don't want to say yes unless I can mean it for real." They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights flickering beyond the windows. Graham looked at her gently. "Whatever you decide, you've already given us more than you know." Michelle sipped her tea, feeling something shift quietly inside her, like safety had finally found its way back. It wasn't about romance or even work. It was about being seen, being trusted, and being allowed to stay without needing to prove her worth every day. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to leave just because things got quiet. The next morning, Leo did something new. He sat beside Michelle on the rug and pulled out 2 cards, one with a happy face, one with a question mark. Then, with his tiny fingers, he pointed to himself, then to the happy face. Michelle blinked. "You feel happy today?" she asked gently. Leo gave the tiniest nod. Then he reached into his lap and handed her the green coaster. the same one he had always kept for himself. Michelle placed her hand over her chest. "Thank you, Leo," she whispered. "This means a lot." Graham stood nearby, watching everything. His eyes were red, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. In this quiet language, built from patience and rhythm, they had created something that therapy reports and money couldn't buy. They had built trust. Slowly, carefully, honestly. And Leo, without saying much at all, had said more than enough. It had been a peaceful stretch of days. Leo was doing better than ever, waking up without panic, eating full meals, and humming more often than he used to. Michelle had eased back into her routine too, coming and going quietly, never forcing too much or too little. Graham seemed lighter, almost like a weight had been pulled off his shoulders. On Thursday morning, Michelle was helping Leo work through a quiet card-matching game when a knock came at the penthouse door. Mrs. Thompson went to answer it. A moment later, she returned to the room looking pale. "There are people here to see Mr. Wexler," she said carefully. "Child Protective Services." Michelle stood up slowly. Graham, who had been in the hallway, stepped in quickly. "What?" he asked, frowning. "Did they say why?" Mrs. Thompson handed him a card. "They say it's about Leo. An anonymous concern was filed. They need to talk. Now." Two women stepped inside the penthouse. One of them, a tall woman in a brown suit, introduced herself. "I'm Officer Linda Garrison with CPS. This is my partner, Investigator Evans. We received a report regarding the care and environment of your son Leo." Graham narrowed his eyes. "What kind of report?" Officer Garrison remained calm. "It states that an unlicensed, untrained individual has been caring for Leo in place of a certified behavioral professional. The report claims it may be causing him emotional harm." Graham's jaw tightened. "That's not true. Michelle has done more for my son than anyone else has." Officer Garrison nodded. "That may be so, sir, but we still have to observe, speak to the child, and assess the living environment." Michelle stepped forward calmly. "Leo's sensitive to strangers. If you approach too fast or too loud, he could panic." The officer gave a polite but firm nod. "We understand. We'll proceed gently." But even gentle wasn't enough. The moment the women stepped into the living room, Leo froze. He looked at their notepads, their formal clothes, the unfamiliar shoes on the rug, and immediately started tapping his legs rapidly. Michelle crouched beside him. "It's okay, baby. You're safe," she whispered. But Leo's breathing picked up. He stared at the women, then at Graham, then at the door, as if planning how to escape. One of the officers took a step closer, and that's when Leo broke. He let out a high-pitched cry and threw himself against the bookshelf, scattering books and puzzles to the floor. He dropped to the rug, rocking fast, hands pressed to his ears. Too loud. Too close. Too loud. Michelle jumped into action, reaching into her bag and pulling out his blue coaster. She tapped it slowly, not speaking, just tapping. Leo spotted the motion, and even in panic, his body started to slow down to match it. The officers were startled. "Should we leave the room?" one asked. Graham stepped between them and the rug. "Yes," he said sharply. "Now." As the CPS workers stepped back into the hallway, Michelle stayed with Leo. She continued tapping the coaster, then set it gently into his hands. "I've got you," she whispered. "We're not leaving. You're okay. Just breathe." Slowly, Leo's body stopped shaking. He curled up against Michelle, still breathing fast, but no longer screaming. Graham knelt beside them, face pale. "Who would do this?" he asked in a low voice. "Who would report something like this?" Michelle didn't answer. She was still helping Leo place the coaster flat on the rug. But her eyes said what they couldn't say out loud. Someone had meant to cause damage, not help. Someone had wanted Michelle gone. And now, they had brought chaos into a boy's life that had only just begun to settle. That evening, after the officers left, Graham went straight to the office. His head was spinning, but he had a lead. He made one call, to the tech team that handled Wexler Tech's internal emails. I need to know who accessed or sent anything related to Michelle Washington or my son in the past 2 weeks, he told them. Within an hour, they had their answer. The email that anonymously flagged Michelle to the city had been drafted on a company laptop registered to Matthew Lennox. Graham's blood boiled. He stormed into the office the next morning and walked straight into Matthew's meeting. "You sent the report to CPS," he said coldly. "Don't lie. We traced the IP." Matthew, caught off guard, tried to stay calm. "I was protecting the company. You brought a woman in off the street. A bartender. Into your home. It's not professional." Graham didn't flinch. "You endangered my child. You humiliated someone who saved him. You're fired. Effective immediately." News of Matthew's firing traveled fast, but Graham wasn't done. That afternoon, he held a short press conference outside Wexler Tech's headquarters. "I want to make a public statement," he began. "There's been speculation about my son's care. I'd like to clear it up. My son Leo has obsessive-compulsive disorder. He's been through more trauma than any child should. A woman named Michelle Washington stepped into his world with kindness and patience, and for the first time in years, he is laughing, eating, and speaking. If that's a scandal, then let it be one." Reporters fired questions, but Graham didn't stay long. He wasn't doing this for headlines. He was doing it to protect the person who had become essential to Leo, and to him. After the press left, he turned to Michelle, who had watched from the building's edge. "Thank you for standing with us," she said. Graham replied, "I should have done it sooner." She nodded quietly. "You did it when it counted." The situation didn't end there. CPS still required a formal hearing to close the file. Graham hired a lawyer and pushed to turn the tables, filing for defamation against Matthew Lennox. The hearing was held in a small family courtroom the following week. Graham testified first, sharing how Michelle had stepped into their lives. Then Mrs. Thompson. Then even Dr. Clara, the therapist who had once doubted Michelle, stood up and admitted she had seen real progress in Leo since Michelle began working with him. Finally, Michelle was called. She stood with her hands folded, voice steady. "I'm not a therapist," she said clearly. "I'm someone who saw a child in pain and knew how to reach him. Not because of a license, but because I loved someone just like him once. And I refused to let Leo slip through the cracks." The courtroom was quiet. Even the judge, Ray Harlan, leaned forward slightly in his chair. Then came the most unexpected moment. As the judge prepared to close the session, he glanced toward the child's table. "Is Leo here today?" he asked. Graham nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. He's with Mrs. Thompson in the hallway. We didn't want to overwhelm him." The judge paused. Would he want to speak? Even one word? Only if he wants to. Graham turned toward the door, unsure. But before he could even stand, the door opened quietly, and Leo stepped in, holding Michelle's hand. His steps were slow, but he walked all the way to the front of the courtroom and stood beside Graham. The judge smiled. "Hello, Leo." Leo looked at Michelle, then back at the judge. Then he whispered, clear enough for all to hear, "Dad." The courtroom gasped. Graham's mouth fell open. He looked at Michelle, then dropped to one knee beside his son. "I'm right here, buddy." Leo nodded once. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. The morning after the hearing, the city felt calmer. The sun rose without rush, the air was crisp but not cold, and for the first time in weeks, Michelle woke up with a quiet heart. No headlines. No fear. No cameras outside her building. Just light. When she arrived at the Wexler penthouse that morning, Leo was already sitting by the window, wearing his favorite gray sweater and holding two coasters, one blue, one green. The moment he saw Michelle, he held both out toward her, like an offering. She stepped into the room and gently took the green one. "Thank you, baby," she whispered. Leo nodded and patted the floor beside him. Graham entered from the hallway, still in his robe, a warm cup of coffee in hand. "He's been waiting for you since 6, he said with a quiet smile. "I told him you'd be here. He didn't doubt it." Michelle smiled. "That makes 2 of us." Later that day, the judge's final statement was released in writing. The case was officially closed. The false report had been deemed malicious, and Matthew Lennox was fined for defamation and permanently removed from the Wexler Tech Board. The judge had written, "In matters of child welfare, sometimes the best care isn't found in credentials, but in consistent, compassionate presence." Graham read the letter twice, then handed it to Michelle. "You earned this," he said softly. "I didn't win it for you. You did it yourself." Michelle folded the letter and placed it gently in her bag. "It's not about winning," she said. "It's about keeping Leo safe. That's all I care about." Graham studied her face for a moment, then sat beside her on the rug. "I need to ask again," he said seriously. "Not because I'm unsure, but because I believe we're at a place where it matters. Will you stay? Not just as help, but as family." Michelle looked at him, eyes soft. "Family?" Graham nodded. "Yes. We can figure out the details. But Leo trusts you. I trust you. We don't want a new therapist. We want you. If you'll have us." Michelle thought for a moment. She had spent most of her life moving from place to place, never staying long enough to plant roots. She had always told herself it was safer that way. But for the first time, she didn't want to run. She looked over at Leo, who was now gently tapping a rhythm on the hardwood floor, humming to himself. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay. But only on one condition." Graham raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Michelle smiled. "We keep doing this as a team. You, me, and Leo. No one gets left behind. Not even on the hard days." Graham extended his hand. "Deal." She shook it. And just like that, the decision was made, not with contracts, but with trust. As the weeks passed, the household grew into a new rhythm. Michelle became more than a caregiver. She was a guide, a friend, a safe place. She helped create visual schedules on the fridge, reorganized the toy room to support Leo's routines, and introduced calming music into bedtime rituals. Graham, for his part, made time for it all. He came home earlier. He joined in sensory play. He even learned to make Leo's favorite snack, carrot sticks dipped in applesauce, arranged in neat rows. It didn't always go perfectly. There were still moments of overload, still days when Leo shut down or got overwhelmed. But now, instead of rushing to fix it, they waited with him. They stayed. And slowly, the panic attacks lessened. The screaming faded. The fear started to dissolve. One morning, as Michelle set the table, Leo walked up and said clearly, "Do we have eggs?" Michelle turned around, stunned. "Yes," she said softly. "Do you want some?" Leo nodded. Graham walked in just in time to hear the exchange. His eyes filled with tears. "Did he just ask you a full sentence?" Michelle nodded slowly, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. "You sure did, buddy," she said. "That was amazing." Leo looked up at her, then at his dad, and said, "I want eggs. Please." Graham had to sit down. He covered his mouth and looked at Michelle, completely overwhelmed. She walked over and handed him a tissue. "Deep breaths," she joked gently. "We're all growing together." That day, they made eggs together, Michelle cooking, Graham scrambling, and Leo tapping his fingers on the counter in rhythm. It wasn't a celebration with cake or balloons. It was just life, flowing gently forward, filled with small steps and big meaning. And for once, they didn't feel like 3 broken pieces trying to fit. They felt like a unit, messy, imperfect, but whole. One Saturday afternoon, they returned to the rooftop garden. Michelle spread out the blanket beneath the same tree where Rosa had played that day in the park. Leo brought his coasters, now a full collection of 6 colors. Graham carried a basket of snacks. They sat under the wide blue sky, letting the breeze move through them. Leo lined up his coasters slowly, then looked at Michelle. "Tell me a story," he said. Michelle blinked. "What kind of story?" Leo thought for a moment. About Isaiah. It was the first time he had ever asked. Michelle took a breath, then began. Isaiah was funny. He used to hide my shoes and replace them with spoons. One time, he convinced our whole church to sing the wrong verse, on purpose. He said the world made more sense when people laughed. Leo smiled. I like that. Graham rested a hand on Michelle's shoulder. So do I. The wind moved gently through the leaves, like a whisper. As evening fell, they sat watching the lights of the city flicker on below them. Leo lay on the blanket between Michelle and Graham, holding one coaster in each hand. He looked peaceful, eyes soft, body relaxed. After a long silence, he sat up and turned toward Michelle. I'm glad you came back, he said. Then he did something he had never done before. He opened his arms. Michelle leaned in, and he hugged her. Not quick. Not nervous. A full, real hug. The kind that said everything words couldn't. Graham turned away just slightly to wipe his face. Michelle whispered, I'm glad I came back too. The city buzzed softly below them, but up there on the rooftop, all was quiet. Not because the world had stopped, but because they had finally found peace. Not perfect peace, but real peace, the kind you build together, one moment at a time.